Okay, hi, my name is Christoph. I'm here with Johns today to talk about supporting open design in Bitcoin. And we are representing the Bitcoin design community. I'll do the first half, Johns will tackle the second half, but let's hop right into this. So Bitcoin is this magic internet money. It's currently the 15th largest currency in the world, which is pretty incredible for an open source project. And we think it embodies a tons of these great open source values from permissionlessness, open collaboration and decentralization, all kinds of good stuff. And we think it's really worth spending time and energy on this. So the Bitcoin design community is about 1.5 years old now. We represented at FOSDEM 2021 a year ago. At that time, we were half a year old. And we were just kind of new, trying to get our feet wet with everything. And we had big ambitions and goals. Weren't quite sure how it was going to turn out. But we did have our mission, and that is design Bitcoin for everyone. So we want to kind of improve the global user experience of Bitcoin. And that's really only possible if we all work together. So we had a lot of individual designers working in different places. There was no great central place, go-to point for design to happen. And this is why the community was created. So at the end of the last presentation, we said that we needed to mature. It's a year later now. So did we? I would like to say yes, but maybe you be the judge of that one. 20 minutes for a presentation is pretty short, so we're just going to cover some of the things that happened. I hope it's useful for you. So at the root of every community is a space, right? People need to meet somewhere, they need to get to know each other, have conversations, and then they can form groups and make things happen. Now, the services we use have kind of stayed the same, but we have definitely refined our use of them and found out how to make them work better for us, and also figured out some of those gaps. And I do think this is super important if you are working or contributing to a community, that you're very deliberate about the tools and that each one has a specific function. Slack is still our central conversation point. I think we're now maybe 2,500 people or so. Works really great. The only thing we're running into is the limits of the free account. We can only see our last 10,000 conversations or messages. So we kind of have a bit of a collective amnesia happening. And that's something that we're trying to find a solution for. The newsletter has also been going on for over a year. The function here is that people who can't keep up with Slack, they get this newsletter in their inbox every 3 weeks with a very quick visual and textual summary of what happened, and then they can just quickly choose what they're more interested in and just click through and participate. And the second interesting thing is that this works as a really great archive. If you want to look back and look at everything that's done, how things have evolved, this is a super useful tool at the same time. Now, our Twitter account is something where we did have big ambitions from the very beginning, because a lot of Bitcoin conversations happen on Twitter. But this really only started working once somebody stepped up, in our case Alexa, and really took ownership of this channel. And she tells the stories of what's happening in the community, and she puts a lot of life and energy into this. So thank you, Alexa, for tackling that. We organized roughly 110 calls over the last year, and all of those, or majority of them, are now archived on Bitcoin TV and YouTube. And one of the problems we have is that people are spread out over 27 different time zones, as Slack tells me. And so no matter when you schedule it, there's always a bad time for someone, but this allows people to catch up afterwards or whenever it's convenient for them. And there's some kind of longer living content that we found, like design reviews and presentations, that are interesting for a much longer period of time and are helpful to reference later. So we put some effort into making sure those channels are always up to date and nice to browse. So another project, the Bitcoin Design Guide, this was kind of baked in, or it came up right at the beginning, because we did want to gather our collective ideas and those best practices. So this is kind of our human interface guidelines for Bitcoin products. And in the last year, we shipped the version 1, I think in April. And that one took about 9 months. We set up all of the foundations, figured out how to work together, what our goals are, did tons of research and created that content. And then we're just about done with the second version, which revises everything and adds Lightning on top of that, which is kind of like a second layer technology on top of the Bitcoin network, which brings super low fees and basically makes transactions instant. It's really powerful, but it's also brand or still evolving or emerging technology in a way. Now, looking at the table of contents is also interesting. You can see it kind of tripled in size. So we added all this extra content, and then we did a whole revision. And if you look at the left, there's just a lot of kind of generic content, like introductions to the visual language, to the technology. And then if you look at the right, for example, we have a whole section with around 8 pages just about onboarding in a ton of details with mock-ups, prototypes, and all kinds of things. So really cool to see what the whole community and all the contributors put together there. All the activity is managed on GitHub, probably nothing new for a lot of you. We did start using the projects beta for roadmaps, and we're also using milestones heavily now. And this is also something that only started really taking off when Pavel showed up and really put a lot of effort into making this work for us. And the milestones, they're kind of linked to also what we call our jam sessions. That's where we meet up every 3 weeks. Every 3 weeks there's a new milestone, there's a jam session, and we discuss in person about what's going on, what everybody's working on, what they need help with, what to do next. And so it creates a really nice rhythm for the project as a whole. And while GitHub is, can be a little bit dry, the jam sessions also make things a little bit more lively for everyone. Something super interesting for me personally to observe was how writing processes between people differed. Because outside of the jam sessions in GitHub, everybody works really independently. So everybody's kind of experimented with their own way of doing research and writing and designing. There's not enough time to cover this right now. If you are curious to chat about this, I'm also always interested to hearing more approaches to this. So I don't think we're actually going to have a version 3 of the guide, and this is interesting. There seems to be a general sense that now we have a ton of content. We need to be a little bit more outward focused now. So we need to, spread all that information. We need to help onboard designers. We need to work with projects to apply all that information, which will then, improve projects out there and also improve the guide itself. One of the ways we're going to do that is the wallet improvement project, which started a little bit more low key, a little bit more spontaneous. But over the next year, we're going to try to run almost like full design sprints with projects where we go pretty deep, work with the teams, and then always try to come up with improvements and then learnings that go back into the guide. Another byproduct of the guide were the Bitcoin UI kit and icons. So not only do you get this useful information, if you start a new project, you can also duplicate this UI kit and you get a great style guide or a design system with textiles and buttons and everything you need there, and a lot of components unique to Bitcoin. You also get all of these screen designs and user flows with a ton of best practices baked in. Ideally, we'd also like to have matching code libraries to go with this, but maybe we'll get there at some point. Beyond all of those calls, something interesting that happened was at the beginning of the year, the calls were a little bit more organized for the community by the community managers. But then we started to see calls getting organized, kind of organically emerging. For example, this reading group formed, and they spent, I think, 16 or 17 calls in each one discussing one section of this book and kind of in a collaborative learning environment. Another group of designers, they flew down to El Salvador for a conference where they participated and presented. And not only did they do that, because Bitcoin is legal tender there, they also did on-the-ground user research. They tried out all of the different software. They talked to merchants. They talked to locals, try to help them with problems, figure out what their pain points are, and then wrote blog posts about it. We discussed it on a community call, and then they shared all of that information. So that was also super cool. Now, hackathons, this is where I'm going to hand over to Johns for the rest of the presentation. So thanks, Johns. Please take it away.
All right, hackathons, they're usually developer focused. But being a design community, we're producing these guides and resources and talking about open design processes. And there's a bunch of developers building apps and tools that need UI and UX work. Some need help with design thinking and understanding design processes, right? Funny enough, that's what we do. So we wanted to spread the word of open design and show people what we can do together, right? So we visited a bunch of these hackathons last year and started to contribute and join teams. And this is an example of how different communities connect with one another. And in the Bitcoin design community, when we look at it on a macro view, it seems to be like this community of sub-communities. For example, in our Slack, you'll notice a bunch of project channels and topic channels, which is quite typical. I think some interesting things differ in ours. So for instance, there's like these topic channels like payments and private key management or art, which people who are interested in those topics post to. But there's also these project channels like Bitcoin Design Guide, which people who care about working on the design guide tend to hang out. Well, what's important though is for the knowledge that's gained within those sub communities to be able to get surfaced back to the larger community and ecosystem. And I think that's what we do well by all these different pieces of infrastructure and communication outlets that we've kind of come up with. So it's going to be a bit of a story time. I'm going to share with you why it's important to surface this information back up and the progress some of the projects which have come into our community has seen over the past year. So the first story I'm going to give you is with Albi, the Lightning browser extension. It puts the power of a Bitcoin wallet right into your browser. And its target is trying to help creators and website owners monetize their content. It also opens up this new ecosystem that we're seeing kind of like starting to burst through now of Bitcoin web applications, Bitcoin apps, right? And it started by this solo developer at a hackathon, actually. And well, the beginnings tend to not be quite ideal for UX. And, that's very typical for hackathons because, the projects don't really have time to focus on that or resources. So that's why we decided to jump in. So myself and Christoph started to contribute to the project. And how did we contribute? Well, what we did actually was design sprints, and I really love these design sprints. So initially when we joined the hackathon and we selected the team, we didn't really know how the tool worked, how the browser extension worked, and what's the most important UX challenges to solve. So design sprints basically provide you with this framework where you could share knowledge and gain alignment with the contributors of the project or different stakeholders. And the output is this huge digital whiteboard that laid down the foundation of the user flow, of the product definition, design inspiration, and even some storyboarding, right? And Boomy thought that this was so valuable that he didn't really write much code during this hackathon. He just spent his time trying to convey this message and gain alignment with designers, which is awesome. So where is it now? How it's going? The extension got a refresh, the brand got a refresh, and there's a bunch of excitement on social media about it. But I want to highlight one thing in particular. So after the hackathon, Boomy was so happy to get this kind of design support because the user experience was such an important part of this tool that he was making that he brought the project into the Bitcoin design community. So there we created a Slack. It became a formal collaboration. And, most of the discussions with the engineers and the designers happen within our Slack, within the Bitcoin Design Slack. Another story I would like to share with you is one of Zeus. So Zeus is a really powerful non-custodial mobile wallet that allows you to connect to your remote node to use to be able to manage it and spend on the go. It's really great application development and really vibrant user base of excited people, but UX also had a bit of a problem. So Pavel Nex reached out on Twitter to Evan, the project founder, and he asked if he wanted to attend our design review. And Bosch was a designer sitting in on the design review, and he wanted to learn more about Lightning Network. So saw this as a great opportunity to talk to someone, Evan, who's really knowledgeable about this technology, right? So he reached out after the design review to collaborate. And I think these are the best relationships because, it shows that both sides get something, right? And it's mutually beneficial. So they created a Slack channel and began work, and it was a lot of work. So the Zeus redesign has been going on for a while. Bosch has just been pumping out a crazy amount of designs. This just shows part of the artboard. And they really did a great job at surfacing this information back up to the community. So on the newsletters, the calls were getting announced of like if they're happening that week or the upcoming ones. And those calls became like a platform for other people to see the progress of the project. And through that, we see like how important it is, because when the project opens up to others and shares their progress, they're able to excite other people, other potential contributors who are able to then jump in, right? So this working in public and working transparently gives people the opportunity to join in on the movement. And one of those people who joined in was Stephen. So Stephen started helping out with the brand redesign, did a bunch of new illustrations and logos, really fantastic themed work, all custom, really, really awesome work. Tiana also jumped in here to work on the website, because okay, well, if you have a new brand, if you have a new application design, UI design, well, why not a new website as well? So Tiana was helping her out with that, and Bosch, as like the main core designer on that project, helped onboard those new designers who were coming in to contribute. And the final story that I'm going to be telling you about is Bitcoin Smiles. And this is one of my favorite projects, right? Because it's a bit a different story from what I've told you so far. It's not about UI design, but people coming together to solve a very human problem. So as we can gather so far, Pavnex loves Twitter because he had another conversation with someone, this time a guy called Enrique, who's a dentist from El Zonte, El Salvador. And just a side note, El Zonte is a really interesting place for you guys to do some research about, because that's where kind of like this experiment, if you were to call it, started. And it led to the country, the nation of El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as their legal tender. So super interesting. Anyway, so Enrique is a dentist from over there, and there's all this excitement about Bitcoin as legal tender. So Pavnex was wondering, like how the two projects he's contributing to, BTC Pay Server and Bitcoin Design, how those two communities could come together to help people there. And BTC Pay Server is an open source Bitcoin processing software, which you could launch crowdfunding campaigns with, right? So they came up with the challenge of like, how might we help elderly people in El Zonte who don't have access to dental or even healthcare? So how are they going to go about it? So Pavnex, after that discussion on Twitter, came back to the Bitcoin design community, reached out to some of his friends, Alexa and Patricia, and they worked together to create strategy, copy, and of course some visuals. But at the end of the day, design is not just about like creating visuals. It's about problem solving. So there's always a way for you to help. And through all that, Bitcoin Smiles became like really successful. They smashed their initial goal of raising 1 Bitcoin. They're almost at 2 Bitcoin right now. And they still want to make impact. They still want to sell more stories, and they still want to reach a wider audience. So if you're interested, hop on to bitcoinsmiles.org and you can donate or figure out how to contribute and read some of these stories of individuals. People are at the heart of all of what I'm talking about here, right? And the problems that we're trying to solve, it needs people. The coordination could be tricky, but we need help to shape this and build this infrastructure. And even though people might come to the project or the community with different motivations and goals, we're all kind of like huddle around the singular mission of making a positive impact on people's lives and improving the user experience for this technology. That's it for now. Thank you so much. I hope to see some of you guys join our Slack. If you want to help us, define some of this infrastructure and open design stuff. And if you're interested in Bitcoin, hop on in bitcoin.design. Check it out. Connect, make friends. We'll all do good together. Cheers.